Hi, for this session, I'm delighted to be joined by Lorna Steele from the Highland Archive Service. Lorna is going to talk us through their work as they pivoted to digital throughout the pandemic last year, and specifically focusing on their Learn with Lorna series. Lorna, I'd be delighted if you could talk us through some of your slides.
Absolutely. So yes, as you said, my name is Lorna Steele. I'm the Community Engagement Officer for the Highland Archive Service, and that will my title will become relevant as we go through this and why that has made a difference. So the Highland Archive Service covers an area, the third of the landmass of Scotland, so it's a substantial area. So one of the coverage issues we have at the best of times, never mind with COVID, is actively and appropriately and equally representing the whole of that area, making sure that the people in the communities of the Highlands can access our collections, but also that when we're talking about our collections, that we're representing the whole area we cover and not just focusing on the big areas. So before COVID hit, we already had some digital platforms. We had 2 websites, so Ambala website, which is the Highland History and Culture Digital Archive. We had the Highland Archive Service website. We issued digital newsletters. We had 5 Facebook pages and 2 Twitter pages. So we already did have a bit of a digital presence already. But when COVID hit, some of the things we tried to do, we built on some of the work we had already done. We also transferred some of our in-person work onto online. And then also we started some brand new initiatives, and that's what I'm going to touch on here. So this is an example of something that we had done previously, but we really kind of ramped up the level of delivering it. And this is the mystery photos on Ambala. And you can see there from the engagement figures there, that one on the left, 492 people engaging with that image of us trying to work out some more information about the images that we hold on Ambala. So that's a great example of us using the knowledge that's in our communities, whether that's local or international, to add to the knowledge that we have in our collections.
And had you seen those numbers, sorry, if I can just ask quickly,
absolutely.
Did you see those numbers go up really quickly during the lockdown, or did you already have quite a high level of engagement online?
Ambala has always had a high level of digital engagement because it's very visual. So much of that's on there is old photographs and a really wide range and date as well. So people are interested in the old photographs as a sort of curiosity thing, but also a lot of sort of 50s, 60s, 70s things where people can remember. So it's always had high digital engagement. But yes, great for so many people sitting at home. It was something to do and something that they could maybe contribute to, and that's something that's been really helpful to us with our collections.
Yeah, just seeing that appetite from the early stages.
Yeah. I mentioned that some of the things we were doing in person, we worked out and moved online. So an example of that was delivering family history consultations. So we do one-to-one family history research consultations, which have always been in person. Those are now on Skype or online. And the other thing that we did similar to that was delivering online family history and archive for beginners classes. We've always delivered them for many years in person at the Highland Archive Centre in Inverness, but it gave us the opportunity for the first time to deliver them online, which meant that people could attend from other countries, from the rest of the UK, and learn more about our collections that way. So the classes have been very well attended during lockdown. We've had 390 people attend the classes that we've delivered online, and it's just something that actually turned out to be a benefit for us, what we would have struggled to do otherwise. And then what we're looking to do going forwards is to broaden the content of those classes out so that we're covering all of the Highland Archive Service centres, which we wouldn't have been able to do previously. Another thing as an example of something that we would do in person but that we took online was Nucleus, the Nuclear and Caithness Archives, one of our 4 centres, created an online exhibition looking at atomic housing and the transformation of the town of Thurso. And again, that's something we would have done. We would have had it running for maybe 1 or 2 days, having to get all the original material out each time because it would have to go back to the strong room at night. But the team learned how to do it, created an online exhibition, and that's had about 7,000 people attend it, which is something that we would never have been able to do in person. One thing that we were absolutely delighted to be able to do, because it was such a huge job taking such a long time, it was being able to increase public access to our collections through the completion of our online catalogue. That's been something that's been many years in the process. So that was amazing to finally get that done. And it just meant while people weren't able to come into our buildings, they were able to find out about what we held.
And was it the additional time that the staff were able to have by not being able to be sort of on the front line in those centres that gave them the extra time to do that?
It was, yes, it's a combination of, well, there are plus and minuses to that, because obviously they didn't need to be public facing to quite the same extent. But on the other hand, we were hit, of course, with furlough and people being on furlough. But I think we also saw that as people couldn't get into the buildings, the catalogues were becoming even more of a priority, so that people had some connection to what we held. It also means now that we're reopening the buildings that a lot of people are coming in armed with knowledge about what we hold already, because they've been able to use that time to research what we hold. And that's been really useful. And I'll come back to that actually when I'm talking about Learn with Lorna, that if you spark that interest in researching, you can do your starter research on the catalogues and then come back in when we're reopened.
Yeah, it's that cultivating a more informed visitor. So you're starting.
Absolutely, yeah. Starting from a place of a bit more knowledge. And then, as I mentioned, some things that we did were entirely new. So these examples of blog posts are from Nucleus, Nuclear and Caithness Archives. Their team weren't furloughed, so they were able to spend time creating that online exhibition and these blog posts, which are just really detailed looks at a collection or a story or a person. And again, they've been really, really popular and gathered a lot of interest. We also set up a digital engagement working group within the service. And that again was something that COVID really enabled us to do, because we had representatives from all 4 of our offices on it, which meant that we were able to sit round a table, if you will, and create a much more service-wide plan for our digital engagement, which was something that we could have done previously, but the need wasn't there for us to work like that. And so that's been a really positive thing. And that's how we came out with a year of themed social media posts that we're working through at the moment. Something that came out of that was the creation of very short films. So for instance, the month of May that we're in at the moment is our theme. We've created a theme of business and industry. And so each of our 4 offices are pulling items from their collections to tie into that common theme. And you can see here some of the short films that were produced to introduce each subject, just a minute or 2 minutes long. But you can see there that some of them, that Leibster one with 2,000 views for a film that's a minute and a half long. And then within those themes as well, we delivered online talks, which we hadn't done previously because we'd always been doing in-person talks. But again, that increase in people being able to attend those has been substantial.
Had you thought about doing it beforehand? Is it something that had been in discussion, or was it a completely new idea?
It was we hadn't done it before. We'd taken part in like one-off webinars or conferences, things like that. But we hadn't run our own talk online just for the purpose of doing it online rather than in person. So that's probably something that we will certainly continue, because again, that the audience who were able to come were people who would never make it through our door in person. And that's great. And then, yeah, the main thing that I was going to talk about today was the Learn with Lorna series. So this was another brand new thing that we put together purely because of lockdown. This started in March 2020, as soon as we went into lockdown. It was really born out of a necessity to do something to keep our profile up, to keep people engaging with our collections. We didn't know how long buildings were going to be shut. And so this is a series of short films shown every week on our Facebook and YouTube channels. They're about half an hour. Anyone who's watched me will know sometimes they go on a little bit, but they're about half an hour long. And they're just me talking to camera about a collection, a subject, a person, something within our collections. One of the great things that's come out of that is that I've been able to touch on stories from across all of our collections. So we've been able to, coming back to the challenges I mentioned at the beginning, we've been able to effectively reach our Highland communities as well as a wider audience. But we've also been able to effectively represent the collections held in all 4 offices. So you can see there examples of things like pubs, inns and the temperance movement, or the growth of tourism. And those are stories drawn from all 4 offices, but sometimes I'll do ones that are focused specifically on one collection in one of the offices. So there's been over 60 films to date covering all different subjects, and we've had over 180,000 people engaging with the series to date. So again, something we would not have been able to achieve through giving a series of talks in the buildings. Initially, I started the series, it was aimed at people who were homeschooling, because I was very conscious that a lot of parents were suddenly having children at home and needing to find content for them. And so I created a series of 14 initially that were on the themes that you can see on the screen there. So things like the Jacobites, World War II, World War I, the Victorians, things like that. And I created accompanying resources and activities that sat on our website. But then at the end of the term, that first term, we went into the summer holidays, I realised that a lot of people who were watching were adults and from all across the world. And so that the focus of it diversified a little bit to be for adults, although it does still sit on the Digital Schools Hub for schools to access. As I mentioned, a range of age ranges watching, and also a range of people across the world. I'm really, really delighted with that pie chart that you can see on the right-hand side. So I put out a survey, it's still open until the end of May, about the series. And from the responses I've had to date, you can see that it's an almost 50-50 split of Highland residents and people out with the Highlands. And I'm absolutely delighted that we've been able to hold on to both of those streams of audience. So something in it is keeping both of them engaged, and I'm really delighted about that. But you can see there that examples from Sutherland, Dingwall, Skye, Lairg, but also Canada, Australia, USA. So really pleased about that.
Is Canada biggest because it was the largest amount of viewers, or is it just?
Yeah, because most people have typed it. It's really interesting. There's a lot of Canadian viewers, but in terms of interaction and speaking, it depends. It's mostly UK people that kind of interact on it, although some in Australia, some in America. But yeah, it's an interesting split. And you can see on this one why people are watching the series. So mostly for a general interest in history or family history, but there's people there who want to learn about where they live in the Highlands or to improve their understanding of the story of the Highlands, as well as for studies and education. So that was really interesting for me to see who's watching and why. And I know from people commenting that there are tour guides, there are teachers, there are people who work in other heritage organisations. So it's a real range of people watching, and that's interesting as well. I know one of the things that people will maybe be interested in finding out is the challenges of putting on a series of that scale. One of the main things is I mentioned that the series runs weekly. That's a big ask on time, particularly because when you've got one person's name in the title, it's on one person's shoulders. So that time is linked to me. So resourcing that is occasionally an issue, and sometimes holidays get cancelled or delayed, or I need to pre-record things, and then that comes with its own challenges. One of the other things, a challenge for Learn with Lorna specifically, has been sometimes the tech, not often, but just things like updates happening on browsers, things like that. And then when you come to do it, Facebook's changed its algorithms and things like that has sometimes been, but really not very much at all, and nothing that we can't adapt to. But certainly I would say one of the biggest challenges has been would be resourcing it going forwards. And I mentioned at the beginning that I have the job title Community Engagement Officer, and I'm very conscious that a lot of heritage organisations don't have that post. And so if they were going to replicate something like this, that's a huge ask on somebody else's time. So I have a huge and wide-ranging remit, but this falls smack bang into the middle of it. So it's a completely justifiable use of my time, where it might be a little harder for some other organisations to accommodate that.
Yeah.
The feedback we've had has been, for all our online engagement, has been really, really positive, and it's been lovely to see it coming in. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to put out the survey, because there were so many comments coming in of people saying, this is making a difference, or I never knew that this is what an archive is or does. Those sorts of things I wanted to try and capture. And you'll see there some of the words that come out in that word cloud: enthusiasm, knowledge, informative, easy information. That's one of my favourite ones there, of someone saying, I can understand it's accessible. There's storytelling is one of the things that comes out a lot. And quite a few people saying it's like having a cup of tea with a friend who knows a lot. So I love that. And there really has been such a feeling of community has come out of it, people interacting with each other, getting in touch with each other, getting in touch with me. It's been really pleasant. I even received a Christmas cake from Australia on the back of Learn with Lorna and a bottle of wine from Glasgow. So there you go. But I think one of the best benefits from our point of view, the most important things, is that you can see there 98% of people saying that this series has increased their knowledge of the collections that we hold. And I'm delighted about that. And then following on from that, what's that, 87% of people saying that it's changed their understanding of what an archive is and what an archive does. So a lot of people saying they hadn't realised that you can see their access, the wealth of knowledge, the number of collections, the variety of the collections. So that's really, really gratifying for us to learn that people are understanding more, because that's one of the challenges we always face, is people maybe not knowing what an archive is. Also, an increased connection to the Highlands. So there you can see 90% of people saying that they feel more connected to the Highlands on the back of the series, and that they then want to come and visit. And they want to come and visit not only our archive centres, which is great, but also the other sites that I've talked about in the series. So, for instance, Mackay Country, or Skye or Loch Alsh, or people wanting to visit the places. There's a lady in Australia contacted me to say, after my Wick Harbour Trust one, that she wants to go to Wick purely to pay her respects at the war memorial that's there, because of the names I talked about on that story in that episode. So things like that. And then just to finish off, one that was really, really nice for me to hear was that 98% of people saying that this series had made a difference to them during COVID. So they had learned something, they felt more connected to other people, they felt that it was improved quality of life during the pandemic, and that was lovely to hear as well.
That's just remarkable, actually, the real impact it's had on people's lives as well, and that kind of that deepened connection they have with the Highlands and the different reasons for them to visiting. That's hugely rewarding for you, and just must bring so much to the organisation as well, as to how you have that, as we mentioned earlier, that kind of more informed visitor who's going to come and really want to
Absolutely
add to their own knowledge.
And a really lovely thing for us in terms of our role within other heritage organisations in Highland, that people not only want to visit our archive centres, which is great, but that knowledge and passion and interest in the interaction between the stories of the Highlands past will inevitably mean that they go to the Museum of Childhood, or they go to West Highland Museum, or there will be a push out, I think, if these people visit, into a wider community, and of course into the infrastructure and the local economy, and that's a great thing if that happens.
Do you think there's any steps that we should be taking to ensure that we can kind of capitalise on that for our smaller heritage centres?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know. It's maybe worth organising a chat where we talk around that. I can certainly share with these organisations some of the feedback that I've had and some of the comments about people now wanting to come and visit places. Because, for instance, that lady in Australia who is just desperate for flights to open up so that she can come over, if she's wanting to go to Wick to pay her respects at the memorial, then by all means I want her to know to go to Wick Heritage, to go in and visit and to learn about those things. So yes, there will be a place for sharing that information out. And one of the things I've been asked to do is to share this information with community heritage groups in Scotland as well, just to see what aspects of the smaller community groups can replicate, or how we can work with an audience that's already there to encourage interest in other heritage sites.
I think just one question I'm wrapping up these sessions with is thinking about the future. It has been amazing, I think, to see a lot of our Highland organisations, our heritage organisations, being able to pivot and take so much of their work online and create these new connections with such potential. However, as the world opens up and starts to return to normal, being able to balance both of those is going to be a real challenge on our capacity to deliver that kind of high quality product. What do you think the future is for Learn with Lorna once you're, I guess, back in the day job on a full-time basis? Oh.
So I think in terms of going forward, the series it's been really, really successful, and I'm delighted about that. I think it will continue, certainly for the foreseeable future. One of the questions we asked in the survey was, are there any changes that you want to see? And really most people, the vast majority of people said, no, just please don't stop just because you've gone back to normal. And so I think we will look to continue it. Certainly the engagement figures being what they are, there's no way we would be reaching 180,000 people without the series. So I think we will continue that. But yes, as our buildings are reopening again and things like school visits coming back online, and all the other kind of work I do with community groups and all sorts of things, there will be a juggling act there of how we fit all of that in. But I certainly think that the series will not be allowed to allowed to disappear. We'll just find a way maybe of integrating the two things as well, so that when I'm doing a talk for Learn with Lorna, I can use it for something else that I'm doing in the surrounding weeks.
So it's just being a bit strategic to make sure it can fit with everything else that will now be going on.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we've been trying to relearn is trying to learn is how to reuse things, how to make sure that the amount of work we put in, we write regular newspaper articles for the Northern Times, the Rossshire Journal, the Inverness Courier, and things like that. It's finding those stories that we've researched for those, how can we then reuse them, the amount of work that's gone into them, so that they're reaching a different audience as well. So there will be an element of that, I think, of working out how to share the stories in more than one setting.
Thanks very much, and thank you for sharing all your work with us today, and I look forward to perhaps taking the discussion further forward as to how we can all work together to really see this benefit the wider heritage sector.
Absolutely. Well, I hope it's of interest to people watching. Thank you.